Ever since Mob of the Dead was excluded from Zombie Chronicles, there have been murmurs and talks of a Mob of the Dead remake coming in the future. I've made a few videos about it, and personally, I'm of the belief that we will eventually be seeing a Mob of the Dead remake in the future. I've been thinking about it though, and there might be a fatal flaw that Jason did not think about when he considered making a Mob of the Dead remake. Before we get into that, I want to quickly mention that for a limited time only, for the next 2 weeks, I am selling these posters inspired by Zombie Chronicles. There is one poster inspired by each of the Zombie Chronicles maps. You can get them in a pack of 8, or you can get them in a pack of 4. A link is down below. They're only going to be available for 2 weeks, and after that, they're probably going to be gone forever. So if you want to get them, now is the time. A link is in the description. I want to be very clear. Read my lips, everybody. This is not a rant. I've made a few rant videos in the past couple weeks, and everybody thinks that this is now all what my channel is about. Oh, John's just gonna make new videos discussing everything he dislikes in zombies, and he's just gonna bitch and moan for the rest of eternity. No, this is not a rant. This is just something that I notice a bit of a problem right now, and I wanted to spark a discussion about it to see what you guys had to think about this, because as I think about it, it kind of breaks the notion of a Mob of the Dead remake. The biggest real clue that we have to Mob of the Dead actually coming back as a future remake has to be what Jason said when he mentioned that he's not quite done with Mob of the Dead.
But yeah, Mob, I can't say too much, but what I would say is, I'm sure there's another purpose for that at some point.
So if there's more to do with it, if there's more of a story to tell, what is that story that he's trying to tell in Mob of the Dead? Well, we can look at, say, the timeline for hints. So this swirl on the timeline right here is Dimension 63. Everything I'm about to show you from the timeline is in this dimension, so it's all in one dimension. That's going to be important in a minute. We find out on April 26, 1944, that the Apothicons destroyed Dimension 63. So if they destroyed Dimension 63, everything in this spiral no longer exists. This includes Mob of the Dead, which you can find in the Dimension 63 spiral. So we have Mob of the Dead right here in Dimension 63. And before that, just for context, we have January 19th, 1934. Found guilty of Al's murder, Sal, Finn, and Billy are executed by the electric chair. So, as you see here, this all exists in one universe, and should you erase this universe, which the Apothicons do at the end of the spiral, then Mob of the Dead no longer exists, and everything that happened before and after Mob of the Dead exists. Now, the reason this is important is because we've always had a hard time understanding where in the zombie storyline Mob of the Dead is. Is Mob of the Dead its own bubble? Is Mob of the Dead still a part of its original universe? Or has it been pulled out of its own universe? Is it a new universe? We never exactly knew, but the way the timeline is structured, it suggests that while it is a kind of its own pocket of time, it still exists in that universe. So, we should expect Mob of the Dead itself to disappear when the rest of the dimension is destroyed. Now, what happens after Mob of the Dead? Because maybe a Mob of the Dead remake could happen after the map and then leading up until the dimension is destroyed. So you have about a 10-year period between 1934 and 1944 when a Mob of the Dead remake could exist. Well, when you're looking at the timeline, there aren't really any references to any sort of adventures or any sort of battles, especially with Primus and Ultimus, within the Mob of the Dead timeline. We have them appearing only once in the timeline, and this is July 4th, 1941. Primus arrives to collect Victus's blood samples from Richthofen. Following Primus's departure, Richthofen learns of the location of the summoning key and travels to his next destination. Now, I know you're saying, well, maybe they could have gone to Mob of the Dead beforehand and we just didn't really know about it, or it wasn't marked on the timeline. The thing is, the way they talk about Mob of the Dead in Gorod Krovi, they talk about it as if it was the first time they had ever been there. If you listen to some of the character quotes on that map, they're always like, oh, that disgusting, vile prison. Oh, I never want to go back there again. So if the way they're talking about it makes it seem like it's the first time they were there, if there is ever to be a second adventure in Mob of the Dead, it can't be with Primus. So then we can also look at other things in the timeline. And when you consider Mob of the Dead, there is a 6-year gap between 1934 and 1940 when Richthofen arrives in Dimension 63, where he contacts members of the Illuminati and enlists their help to build a laboratory facility beneath Alcatraz. This is a 6-year period between Mob of the Dead and when Richtofen first enters Mob of the Dead and begins the construction of his lab. Now, from 1944 to 1941, I'm assuming nothing significant happens. Stanley Ferguson just builds the lab. And then from 1941 to 1944, when the universe is destroyed, you have the lead up to Shadows of Evil. So it appears as though the only possible time frame in which a Mob of the Dead remake could happen seems to be from 1934 to 1940. And there is no gap between these 2 points in the timeline. There's nothing going on there. To me, I would think that if there was going to be something that could happen at Mob of the Dead, it would need to happen in this time frame, because the timeline makes no references, no hints, or has nothing in between those 2 locations in the timeline, that nothing of significance happens there, and potentially there might not be a second journey in Mob of the Dead. Now, some of you might say, John, well, what about fractures in time, or maybe in an alternate universe that wasn't destroyed yet? If you can have multiple universes with Richtofen and Maxis, maybe you can have multiple universes with Mob of the Dead. And I would say that's kind of lazy storytelling, and it just seems as though from everything Treyarch is doing, they're kind of moving away from that kind of universe where you have infinite infinites. They're trying to condense things. That was kind of the point of Black Ops 3 in a way. We had created all these fractures and now we wanted to condense them. We wanted to destroy them. You remember hearing Maxis talking about destroying and closing different universes throughout Shadows of Evil. And it's for this reason that I don't think we're going to suddenly start exploring many different infinite universes where everything is possible. That was kind of what was going on in Black Ops 3, but the way Black Ops 3 kind of concludes makes me suggest that that's not actually what's going to be happening in future Call of Duties. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it doesn't seem probable right now just based on the trajectory of the zombie storyline. So when everything's all said and done, when I look at the timeline, when I look at the direction that the zombie storyline is moving, and I consider that Mob of the Dead doesn't really exist after 1944, so it's not like there are things in the timeline that just haven't been written yet, it might seem improbable for us to actually get a Mob of the Dead remake. Unfortunately, while the hints from Jason are there, the story isn't. There is no real link or bit of the story that you can look at and say, this is where the Mob of the Dead remake could be, or this is something. Because even when Primus goes to Mob of the Dead, it doesn't seem like they were at an adventure. The timeline just makes it seem like they were there to pick up blood and then left. Like, there was nothing of significance to happen. Maybe they can turn this into a map, and maybe they can kind of rewrite history, but to me, when I look at everything in the zombie storyline, there's no way to fit in a Mob of the Dead remake without either rewriting history or creating random fractures, which I really hope they do. And it's kind of a fatal flaw in this idea of a Mob of the Dead remake. It's the Achilles heel to all of it, and it might be the very reason we may never see a Mob of the Dead remake, unfortunately. That's going to wrap things up for this video. I just kind of wanted to make a video discussing this. What do you think? Is there something I'm missing? Could there be another reason to have a Mob of the Dead remake? Sure, Jason hints at it, but beyond that, there really isn't any evidence. I'd love to know what you guys have to say. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you can, leave a like, maybe subscribe for more. If you'd like, you can also check out the Zombie Saga posters. A link is down below. As always, you can get them in a pack of 4 or a pack of 8, and they are incredibly well designed. They're jam-packed with Easter eggs, and you can look at them and find multiple things upon multiple viewings that you hadn't seen before. So that's why I think these are really cool. I'd recommend you check them out. I'm going to go, though. Have a wonderful day, and bye.